Today on the Topping Show, Republican Speaker Johnson cancels a vote against DOGE cuts and cuts to USAID. You also have another state joining the 80-mile-per-hour club. Chevrolet Corvette gets more screens and less buttons. The View has Joe Biden on the show and he's even less coherent than before. And Igloo expands the recall of the cooler that might amputate you. All of that and much more on the Topping Show. Thank you everyone for taking the time to tune in today. Today's episode of the Topping Show is probably sponsored by Topping Technologies. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency IT security. Heck, I see their founder at least twice a day. Gotta say he's quite handsome and brilliant. He's me, see, that's the joke. If you're an IT leader or business owner, you can reach out to the team at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also, still giving away a free Flamethrower with every IT purchase, with Picatinny rail adapters so you can mount it to any standard AR-15, like all awesome accessories can be. Go to toppingtechnologies.com and click the Flamethrower button to learn more and see me shooting a flamethrower. And lastly, trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you can click that button and tell your friends, I would greatly appreciate it. Now going over to the business part podcast, you have the new Chevrolet Corvette. Well, they decided, let's add more screens and remove buttons, because that's what the drivers want. Aha, the antithesis, because most drivers actually want those. It's a joke, because the new Corvette is the antithesis of every Corvette, I would argue, because it doesn't even have a third pedal, also known as a manual transmission, which nearly every Corvette, well, the first Corvette in 1953 did have a straight 6 and automatic, but once they had a V8 like they should have from the beginning, they always had the option for the stick shift, which many people did like, but I partially digress. Now, this is brought to us thanks to Ronan at thedrive.com, and he says, quote, 2026 Chevrolet Corvette gains third screen, loses great wall of buttons. Chevrolet is finally rolling out a sleeker, less clustered design for the C8 Corvette's interior, along with a new slate of new tech features. Wow, that's awesome. More tech features. That's what people love. Again, haha, joke. When you actually go to the track, most guys like less tech because that also means less things that can break, and you're kind of focusing on driver's experience. And yeah, more screens, and Lord only knows how many times you have to touch those touch screens to get to the things you actually want. Here you can see the interior of the new Corvette, which at least they angled the screens so it is a driver-oriented vehicle. Not very unique to the Corvette, but you know, most performance cars are oriented that way. But I was gonna say they even got rid of the pull bar. I mean, they got rid of so much of the classic that was a great American car, but nevertheless, they say, quote, the 8th generation Chevrolet Corvette is getting the first major redesign for the upcoming 2026 model year. And I bet you can ultimately guess what's changed. The long row of buttons strewn across the center console is gone at last, which addresses one of the most commonly heard complaints about the C8. No, the most commonly heard complaint is the fact that it's automatic only, which I guess is good news for Volkswagen Group, which owns Porsche, which a lot of the guys are actually going to because they listen to the consumers and give a stick shift option. But I partially digress yet again. Now, they say, quote, the biggest change is the center console, which trades off the row buttons for a much cleaner design. It's still very much driver-oriented, but no longer looks like it belongs in a 40-year-old airplane. That's not to say that Chevrolet jettisoned every button for the cockpit, however. There are a few left over on the center console, including one for the front camera, another for driving the model that looks surprisingly like they're going to say the 911 shifter. I was going to say, how inebriated are they? The 911 shifter. Yeah, no. Well, the 911 also has a stick shift option too, which also, looks like a stick shift. Are they a 911 shifter? How inebriated are they? Also, look at the size of those cup holders taking up so much of the center console. This car is for driving. Yeah, I can't think they put more engineering to the cup holders than they should have. But nevertheless, they continue saying, quote, moving beyond the center console, 2026 will be available in three screens, which is one more than before. There's a 12.7-inch touchscreen for the infotainment system, which is sure to break after about 3 months. I'm only partially exaggerating. A 14-inch digital instrument cluster and a new 6.6-inch auxiliary touchscreen to the left of the steering wheel. That's a lot of pixels, but Chevy tells us there's a very good reason for them. The driver can configure the third screen to display things like trip mileage, details about the performance traction management system. In the Corvette E-Ray, the battery pack capacity, giving the information its own space, and make the digital instrument cluster less cluttered in the middle and easier to read. His center console's touchscreen is bigger than before, and now runs Google built in, which I'm not a fan of the Google, but it does at least make sense in terms of you want the Google Maps. I understand the benefit of that, and the fact that it didn't already have that is kind of pathetic from GM. Nevertheless, this brings in apps into the cabin, including Google Chrome, Game Snacks, and Prime Video. Prime Video, the hell do you need that for? Prime Video? Supposed to be driving the car, not watching a car video game? What? And it says, so you can play games and watch shows on the touchscreen while the Corvette is parked. Sir, if you have a car that's parked and you're playing those types of games, you have lost in life. Now, they say if you want your supercar with an extra side touch, you'll be pleased to learn that the number of functions bundled in the Performance app have been expanded. There's a new G-force gauge, which the fact that it's not standard is already pretty hilarious because my Honda Civic SI that costs a fraction of the Corvette, though I would argue is much better bang for the buck, it comes standard on my car. And yet they're saying, oh yeah, now we got it. Now we got the G-force gauge. Now they also have live feeded temperature of the fluids as well. There you go. Let's see here. There's only one really interesting thing to me. It says, in terms of the exterior updates, we already know the next model year is bringing in 2 new colors called Roswell Green Metallic and Black Silver Metallic, respectively, a new asymmetrical exterior center stripe, a trim level with specific tweaks. The E-Ray gets a standard body-colored rocker panels, for example. Another cool addition is the addition of the electrochromatic roof panel that lets passengers change the tint level with the push of a button. To me, I think the only thing that's really interesting, well, I was going to say, to me, it just becomes more of a pain in the ass that they're doing here. Though at least the green does kind of look cool. I have a soft spot in my heart for green cars. I kind of got addicted to them ever since I got my first one. I hope to have many in the future. It does look like a cool green Corvette, and aesthetically, at least from the front, it looks like a pretty kick-ass car. Though again, I think the rear taillights should have been more to the original 4 circular ones. I know the previous ones were hexagonal. I understand that for the C7 Corvette. But at least that shade looks pretty cool, the Chevrolet Corvette ZR1. So you get some updates, and it's kind of sad to think that the only stick-shift performance cars GM makes is now the Cadillac CT4 Blackwing and CT5e Blackwing. The Camaro's dead, and the Corvette's pretending to compete with Lamborghini and Ferrari. But let me know, do you think these updates are good? I mean, it is funny that most major manufacturers are moving away from the touchscreens, moving more towards physical buttons to consumer demand, but let me know your thoughts, guys. As always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Now, going over to the Cultural Report podcast, you have The View hosting Joe Biden and sounding as incoherent as ever, though some people might argue he still speaks more articulately than myself, but that will be a debate for the comments. Now, this is brought to us thanks to Libs of TikTok, in which he says, quote, dementia patient Joe Biden is on The View, mumbling incoherently. Democrats gaslighted us, knowingly covered for his obvious cognitive decline for 3.5 years until they coordinated a coup against him to oust him. Never forget. True. Nothing is more hilarious than, I believe it was MSNBC, the mentally vacuous host, was it Tapper? He said, oh yeah, I've never seen Joe Biden more articulate, more, he's just as sharp today as ever was. Then he attempted to debate Donald Trump and failed epically. And I would argue on that day, he did for sure sound less coherent than myself. He mumbled more than me, I would argue. Though I do have a joke. Maybe kind of serious. I have a theory. When I first started the show, really didn't have any subscribers, well, maybe family, and I stumbled over my words worse than Joe Biden trying to climb upstairs and spoke faster than Ben Shapiro. However, as I slowly but surely gain more subscribers, I become slightly better at speaking. Some might argue just a modicum of increase, just a little bit better, though I would argue a statistical increase nevertheless, which fuels the theory. If you click that button, I would greatly appreciate it. I will someday make it through an entire episode speaking articulately, perfectly, and amazingly, in theory. So if you click that button and tell friends, I greatly appreciate it. And shoot, tell your enemies. It might infuriate them so much because they hate the content, and it might make some more conflict between you two, which I guess I shouldn't recommend legally, though I would argue it could be entertaining. And you never know, maybe they fall in love because they're so enamored with your excellent recommendation of a show, they then become your friend. You never know. Anything could happen. At least be some cheap entertainment. So if you go ahead and click that button, tell your friends and your enemies, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, without too much further ado, and to Joe Biden's credit, or no, more accurately, to Joe Biden's handler's credit, at least they did suit him up, so he looks, at least the suit does look pretty good. So he actually, in that one metric, looks good, especially compared to The View, though granted, anything compared to The View, visually speaking, is going to be infinitely more appealing. So I understand that. But without too much further ado, this is Joe Biden attempting to speak.
That all the all the projects, the benefits. How do you lead the world without having the best infrastructure in the world? How do you lead the world without having the best healthcare in the world? How do you lead the world without having the best education system in the world? How do you lead the world when you don't have that done?
Truth, never forget his best quote. Truth and sharpen the pressure. Actually, I wonder if something's wrong with him. I don't know if that's an IV injection point or what. Yeah, are there any doctors on the show? Maybe. But on his left, yeah, on the upside of his left palm, there's a clear circular, almost like a bruise. I don't know what's going on there. But, and I also understand what's the upside to him going on the show. Traditionally, you know, cliche politicians would retire. Well, they go around, get the speaking fees from the bankers and the industries that they do favors for with their, then they, you know, do the speaking track, or they publish a book that, you know, would somehow make millions, but no one would actually buy. I really don't get why he's going on The View. He's not, I don't see him trying to sell any book now that anyone would read it or that he could write. Yeah, really bizarre. And maybe everyone's just so used to Joe Biden being incoherent and incognitive. I mean, it got about 80,000 views, so it didn't go that viral, but it got 1.7 thousand likes. And one of the first comments, well, I'm a little biased. It's not the number one comment by number of likes, but I think this person's especially handsome and brilliant. Haha, that's me, the topping show on X, in which I say, quote, you can tell a Democrat is lying because their lips are moving, getting 2 likes. You also have Chuck Costello saying, quote, what is Joe Biden saying? I can never understand him. What do you think this guy is saying? Best answer receives a follow back, getting 54 likes. 25 comments. What did people say? Let's see. Lifenews.com says, quote, I once had a small kitchen fire, which is why I'm qualified to be the next pope, getting 3 likes. Let's see. Drew says, folks, let me, what? Oh, I guess I should do this in Joe Biden's accent. Folks, let me, what? The fibbity gobbity, you know, where's the chocolate chip? No, wait. The moon. We got a shimmerly shabba. Oh, come on, pal. Pop pizza. Riding bicycle with a toaster. Come on, man. Come on, man. Where's my flippity flop? That did get 2 likes. I'll get 3 likes. I think that's the closest to Joe Biden. Going back to the main comment section, you have Planet of Memes or Planet of Memes finally coming strong with a meme. Usually it's I would say it's about 85% of the time he doesn't do a meme at all. So they did good this time. He says, quote, what an embarrassment. It's the captcha question when you're on the internets. It says, select all the squares of an embarrassment. It's just a picture of Joe Biden with all the squares being checked, getting 20 likes. You have Zero Left saying, quote, Joe Biden is the worst U.S. president, getting 9 likes. The Undercurrent says, Joe Biden on The View feels like a live-action Mad Libs game where every sentence ends in confusion and applause. Democrats push this man as, quote, fit to lead, and now he's out there battling a coffee mug on national TV, getting 19 likes. Someone has didn't get any likes, but I thought this is funny. John's Memes has a picture of Joe Biden photoshopped with like the MMA or some type of boxing arena. It says, let's get ready to mumble. Which, that's a pun, because, you know, let's get ready to rumble. Though if Joe Biden were to say it, he'd probably say, let's get ready to mumble, man. Come on. I can't tell. Is that a guy or girl? They're all fighting. Women can be men. Let's see here. Let's see. Rob Miller says, Joy looks very concerned and she's coaching him and leading him. What's with her arm? Getting 6 likes. Yeah. Have it make sense. I can't even listen to this guy. There's too much secondhand embarrassment. Getting 10 likes. Ryan Sheridan says, quote, this level of gaslighting is insane. They're doubling down. Why not just ride off into the sunset, dude? If you don't see the truth now, you're willfully ignoring it. We were lied to repeatedly from the top. Getting 18. Let's get 19 likes. And again, I really don't understand the upside. I mean, if anything, I thought Joe Biden would try to, if he was more cognitively there with us, shed light on the fact that they ousted him. Because again, to this day, Joe Biden never publicly said he was dropping out the presidential race. It was a tweet. And we all know he doesn't tweet himself. There's been, what was it, Karine Jean-Pierre? Yeah, the Sideshow Bob gal. I mean, there are instances where she tweeted from her personal account in Joe Biden's vernacular and vice versa. So we know Joe Biden didn't actually tweet. I don't even think he knows what a phone is. Well, what's his rotary phone? A little antique pun if you know what a rotary phone is. And my grandpa had one, but I think I just dated myself. Nevertheless. So, I mean, I thought Joe Biden might be out for revenge and like say, hey guys, this is what actually happened, but I don't think he's there enough. Now you also have a lot of people taking screenshots of his hand, wondering what's going on there, and then they're also taking screenshots of the part of the video where she's kind of guiding him with his hand. So yeah, really weird for him to go on The View and act like he's doing stuff these days. But Let me know, what do you think the upside is of his doing this? Shoot the pressure, so to say. And let me know in the comments, who do you think speaks more articulately, Joe Biden or myself? Might be an interesting poll. But with all seriousness, any critical feedback is always appreciated, and appreciate you taking the time to tune in. Now we're going on to another fun political note. Other great political news, you have another state joining the 80-mile-per-hour club. It's beautiful. This is brought to us thanks to Motor1.com. And yet another reason why politics matter. Even if, a wise man did once say, you might not care about politics, but politics very much cares about you. One of the best examples is speed limits, those tyrannical, mostly arbitrary BS limits they put on our lives. I mean, so many shitties in states, and yes, I do, as a slight to cities, which are mostly leftist hellholes, that's why I call them shitties. But it's an instance where a lot of them went down to 50 mile per hour for the gas crisis back in the day because they thought it was going to be most efficient. For some cars, usually 55, 60, but they never increased it because they started to get a lot of revenue from tickets. And it's quite concerning when towns get a majority of the revenue from tickets, almost as if they're begging you to break the law. But I partially digress. One of my biggest pet peeves is speed limits. Because I don't think there should be any speed limits on the highway. If you're properly trained, if you're, well, I was going to say, cars these days get safer and safer. Pretty much any factory car can go 100 mile per hour pretty easily, and it's not too much stress on the vehicle. Now, this is brought to us thanks to Motor1.com, and they say, quote, another state joins the 80 mile per hour speed limit club. All states surrounding North Dakota went up to 80 mile per hour speed limit years ago, save for Minnesotans, which still holds drivers up to 70 mile per hour in the leftist hellhole that is Somalia. I mean, Minnesota, it's hard to tell the difference these days. It's a pun because, they imported so many of them. That's why Omar keeps getting reelected. And here you can see the speed limit sign getting some nice graffiti from 60 to 80. Now, this is brought to us thanks to Chris Smith, specifically over there. He says, quote, those old enough to remember the national 55 mile per hour speed limit have another reason to rejoice. North Dakota will become the next U.S. state to allow legal speeds up to 80 mile per hour on stretches of multi-lane highway. If you ever get to North Dakota, you're now very much welcoming the change, which, shoot, this almost gives me a reason to travel to the north. I might, not live there, but yeah, driving through there, if 80 mile per hour is, but I partially digress. Most people on the Dallas North Tollway usually go 100 anyway, though not legal advice, and I certainly don't. Now, they say, quote, the state's legislature passed a new bill that was signed into law by Governor Kelly Armstrong on May 5th. It passed with a clear majority, but not an overwhelming vote. The bill is actually brought back for a second pass after failing an earlier vote that day, according to North Dakota Monitor. Details regarding fines, which are higher, oh, that's not good, and allowing for flexible limits in certain areas are apparently part of the follow-up discussion. Sellouts. There are also some concerns that a higher speed limit leads to more crashes. It's one of those things where, basic math eludes most people, and also people like to ignore statistics. If you call any insurance company, again, they do more research on this than anyone else because obviously they're physically directly impacted by accidents. Fun fact, most accidents overwhelmingly happen in parking lots where people are not paying attention. Accidents do happen on the highway. Yeah, that's true, obviously. But yeah, in terms of the volume of accidents, mostly parking lots. So I should be especially careful and always be vigilant. Now, they say that North Dakota's previous maximum speed limit was 75 miles per hour. Something up an extra 5 isn't exactly earth-shattering. But the drive points out that the increase better reflects the speed limit most drivers are already going. The legislature turned its southern neighbor for some real statistics. South Dakota raised the speed limit on the most limited access highways to 80 mile per hour in 2015. In years since, there's been no appreciable change in crashes or fatalities. The 80 mile per hour limit will apply to multi-lane highways. Presumably, that means Interstate 94 and Interstate 29. The only major highway in the North Dakota, I-94 runs east to west through the southern position of the state, while I-29 reaches north to south in the far eastern region near Minnesota. The law also seeks variations on the speed limit depending on conditions. It's likely the speed limit will also remain lower around larger cities. The limit goes in effect August 1st. In addition to South Dakota, Montana, the state's western border, has 80 mile per hour speed limit. Minnesota, which borders North Dakota on the east, still at 70 miles per hour. Which, again, I would argue 80 miles per hour is still not fast enough for modern cars. Because again, they're engineered so well these days that most cars are not being pushed to the limit. Especially if you're driving in a straight line and there's nothing around. Why not be able to go as fast as you want? It's your car. Your insurance company might drop you, unfortunately, but I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I have to drive to Lubbock, Texas, And you can see about a mile to the left and a mile to the right is nothing but nothing. Not that I would ever speed, of course. So it's great to see some states increasing that limit, maybe in our lifetime. And again, there's a small stretch, I believe, in Texas Highway that they're recently passing to have no speed limit, which would be great. Might actually give me a reason to drive down south. But let me know your thoughts. And again, it's one of the things where politics matter. Now, unfortunately, it sounds like they didn't elaborate into the actual specifics of the fees, but unfortunately, it sounds like the fees are increased, which I'm not a fan of, because I can't but think they're mostly just revenue generators for the states and the cities. But let me know your thoughts, because as always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Now, going over to the business blunder of the day, you have the Igloo cooler being recalled, well, even more recalled due to their amputation risk, which a lot of people make fun of Yetis because they're, priced more than a used car. But as far as I know, they haven't taken anyone's fingers off yet. So I got to give them some credit. Now, this is brought to us thanks to the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, perhaps the only useful government website. Granted, that bar is quite low. And they say, quote, Igloo expands recall of 90 quart rolling coolers due to fingertip amputation and crashing hazards. Total recall now nearly 1.2 million units. Jeez Louise. And here you can see that cliche Igloo cooler. This one is a gray body with some black wheels. Looks like you got a blue lid on there and a little white trim. This is like car fancy with all those multicolors. That is top drawer, as they would say. Now, geez, I can't believe they messed up this many coolers. Now, they note that about 130,000 additional coolers, in addition to 20,000 in Canada, and more than 1 million Igloo coolers were previously called in February 2025. And they say that, quote, the date manufactured imprinted on the bottom so you can tell if you're impacted by it. The recall numbers and model numbers on the bottom of the cooler are 34692, 34785, 34790. Now they note that the recalled coolers have a tow handle and Igloo printed on the side of the coolers. They're sold in multiple body and light combinations. And they also, in terms of the instance, they've had more than a couple. And I should say consumers should immediately stop using the recalled coolers and contact Igloo for a free replacement handle. Now, specifically, unfortunately, they've had, issues. So since the recall was announced in February 2025, they've received 78 reports of fingertip injuries, including, geez Louise, well, cover your ears if you have kids listening to this. They've had 26 incidents resulting in fingertip amputations, bone fractures, or lacerations. It's not great. Let's say these are sold at darn near everywhere, but Costco, Target, Academy Sports, Dick's, and other stores nationwide, including Amazon.com, igloocoolers.com, and other websites from January 2019 to January 2025. And I guess I can't complain too much relatively to the price because Yetis are like $400, $500, $600 plus. But these are sold for between $80 and $140. And fortunately, it looks like they're a great Texas company. That's embarrassing. Recall number 25-253. And I don't know how you mess up such a simple rudimentary thing as a handle. But yeah, it turns out there's been all those incidents. And people already make fun of Igloo. They're kind of one of those, it's kind of a staple of the, I guess you could call it the cooler community, if that is a thing. Like as a kid, there's always Igloo coolers. They weren't this expensive. But these days usually get made fun of because, they're not the fancy bougie Yeti or one of those fancy other ones like the Arctics. So to have a recall where people are already making fun of you for being an inferior product, in this case, not just inferior, but a deadly, well, not deadly, but, a severe hazardous product. Gotta say, Igloo, you are certainly the business blunder of the day. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Again, trying to get 5,000 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you click that button, I greatly appreciate it. Also, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or comment. It's a great way to give me some additional feedback, letting me know how I can make the show better and better. Lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.